what's extraordinary is that all these old forms of anti-Semitism is being ascribed to the Jewish people. So now you have, people believing that only if Israel would disappear, or if Israel would change, there'd be, the jihad would stop, there'd be world peace. Israel's an apartheid state. The accusation, if Israel's an apartheid state from a liberal human rights perspective, it would have to be dismantled and eliminated. So when people make this canard, this attack on Israel, they're calling for its destruction. And this is the new, I guess, the dominant form of anti-Semitism is the attack on who Jews are as a people. And what's extraordinary, so there's all these, the left would call the Israel and the Jewish people capitalists and fascists, and the extreme left call fascists. The extreme right will call the Jews communists and socialists, right? So we get it from all sides. The attack on the Pittsburgh synagogue was an attack on the liberal Jews who were immigration and refugee policies in the United States. So the left gets us, the right gets us, etc. But the dominant form is an attack on Israel, and I think this is this was what was missed by Jewish leadership in North America and in Europe. They thought that this was a sort of an isolated study, or conflict rather, and that if only the Israelis and the Palestinians would work things out, that all this anti-Semitism and all these problems would dissipate. But of course, this was a miscalculation of how deeply rooted anti-Semitism is in Western civilization.
Anti-Semitism is a demonology, and this is very important. It's a dangerous being because of its relationship with the forces of evil. And this is the core. The Jews help to explain the existence of evil. And this is also taken the idea from Freud, because the problem is, we were supposed to be, in a peaceful, after the venue of the Christ, of Jesus, there should be peace and harmony, and it's not the case. There are wars, diseases, whatsoever. So the only way to save God is to say, it's because of the devil. So the existence of the devil, it's extremely important to save God, to save the religion, etc. But the devil, it's an abstract thing. So you need agent, and the agent are the Jews. The Jews, being the agent of the devil, are responsible of the failure of God. And that's why it's important also to have the Jews, etc. And this idea, it's very old. It's in the Middle Age. And you can see, and this is, it's a conspiracy. You can see that the Sanhedrin, the elders of Zion, are plotting with devil to kill the Christ.
In Israel, the relationship between Jews and Palestinians are like the relationship between whites and blacks in the United States. So many times the white-black divide is being projected to Israel. And but in itself, this may only be an analogy. What is an analogy? It's kind of a structural comparison, right? When we try to compare the relationship. So the relationship in the United States between whites and blacks would be the same as the relationship between Jews and Palestinians in Israel, okay? But I think that there's more. It's not just simply an analogy, not just simply this kind of structural comparison in terms of the relationship between two groups. It's already a more substantive, a more substantial definition of Jews and Jewishness as whites, right? So it's not only the relationship between whites and blacks, the Christians both, but it is really the Jews who are being conceived as white people themselves. And so they are going to the Middle East to colonize and oppress the autochthonous, indigenous people of Palestine. So in a way, the whiteness frame is an essentialization of Jewishness. And through this essential whiteness of Jews is Israeli whiteness being defined afterwards.
I'm saying that the best academics from the best institutions of learning, the most distinguished journalists and media outlets, top politicians, and to this list I can add for you 3 consecutive British prime ministers, MacDonald, Baldwin, and Chamberlain. I can throw in the former Prime Minister David Lloyd George, who in a visit to Berlin in 1936 called Hitler, I quote, the George Washington of his people. I can talk about your Prime Minister, Mackenzie King, and his travel to Berlin, and his laudatory remarks about Hitler. I can keep going. I'm saying this to put pressure on you, to shift the responsibility onto your shoulders as well if you aren't already shouldering the responsibility. These were not unimpressive or uncredentialed people. This was the elite of America, Canada, Britain, France, the great Western powers at the time, and the countries that, had they wished to, perhaps could have stopped Hitler. In fact, as some of you may know, Churchill reported on a conversation that he had with President Roosevelt, in which Roosevelt said to the British leader, "I'm looking for a name for this war." And Churchill said without hesitation, "Call it the unnecessary war." Meaning, of course, that had, and of course Churchill was in the wilderness at the time, he was not in power, but had the world stood up to Germany at, pick your moment, the Rhineland, remilitarization, conscription, ignoring the Kellogg-Briand Pact to End War, ignoring the Washington Naval Conference and limitations on battleships, Abyssinia/Ethiopia, the Anschluss, Austria. At various moments in time, could Hitler have been stopped had our leading institutions and leaders chosen to see things differently? Had America not adopted one neutrality law after another? Had the President of the United States, who in so many ways was such a valiant, visionary leader, nonetheless been frightened by the isolationist wing, the anti-Semitism in the United States, the unwillingness to get involved in another European war? We can only ask the question. But even more importantly, and my message here is, we can only learn from the history